Hello family, enjoy this relaxing moment with charm stories. Remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comment section. Also generously hit the like button cause it means the world to us. Please sit back, relax and enjoy as we dive into the story. Elena stood in front of her bedroom mirror, holding a small velvet pouch in her hand. The pouch contained the check she had painstakingly saved for. She stared at the reflection of her tired eyes. Working back-to-back 12-hour shifts at the hospital had etched faint lines beneath them, but there was also a glimmer of excitement. Tomorrow marked her and Malik's 5th wedding anniversary. Though she knew their marriage wasn't perfect, she was determined to make it a day he would never forget. For as long as she'd known him, Malik had dreamed of opening his own art gallery. Even in college, where they had first met, he'd rhapsodized about showcasing paintings, sculptures, and photography from local artists in a chic, modern space. He'd talk about it during late-night study sessions, and she'd watch the passion in his eyes flicker like a flame that refused to go out. Over the years, Elena quietly saved money from every paycheck. Despite Malik's repeated misfortunes, firings, layoffs, or unexpected job transitions, as he liked to call them, she refused to give up on him. She believed in his dream of curating an art gallery that would captivate the community. She believed in the power of investing in someone you loved, someone who had once swept you off your feet with their charm and unwavering ambition. Now she was ready to make that belief tangible. It had taken her 2 years to accumulate the extra cash. She meticulously trimmed her expenses, skipping lunches out with coworkers and resisting the temptation to upgrade her phone. Small sacrifices added up, and she finally had a substantial amount to offer. Leaning against the dresser, Elena reread the check, $15,000. It might not have been enough to open a massive gallery in the heart of the city, but it was a seed, a foundation he could build upon. She pictured the smile that would spread across Malik's face when she handed him the envelope. He'd always said that Elena was his greatest supporter. How could he not be thrilled? She carefully tucked the check back into the pouch, and then into a hidden compartment of her jewelry box. Satisfied, she exhaled. If all went according to plan, tomorrow would be the start of something beautiful. She wanted to see that determined gleam in his eyes again, to watch him dive headfirst into his greatest passion. Yet a subtle unease tugged at her heart. Malik had been distant. The texts were shorter. The affection had tapered off. He was also out more often, claiming to be looking for new job opportunities. On more than one occasion, he'd skipped their usual dinner and come home after midnight, offering vague explanations. But Elena brushed these worries aside. This anniversary, she convinced herself, would realign them. She could sense the positivity in the air, ripe with possibility. The next morning, Elena rose early, replaying the moment of her surprise in her mind. He'd unwrap the envelope, realize what it meant, and then they'd talk about the next steps. Leasing a small space, drafting a business plan, contacting local artists. It would be their next adventure. She wanted to restore his hope. As Elena left for work, the check remained tucked away in her jewelry box. Little did she know, this carefully planned generosity would set her on a path of heartbreak, discovery, and ultimately, rebirth. Far from the fairy tale she had imagined. Malik's key turned in the lock at 1:16 a.m., a time that had become uncomfortably routine. Elena, half asleep on the living room couch, jerked awake. He closed the door softly, as if hoping to slip in unnoticed. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Hey," she said, a pang of worry shaping her voice. "I was starting to get worried." Malik shrugged off his jacket. "Sorry, babe," he muttered. "The networking event ran longer than I expected. You know how it is." She nodded slowly, trying to push back any suspicion. "Yeah, sure. Did you meet anyone promising?" His eyes flickered in the dim light before he responded. "I talked to a few art gallery owners, a couple of potential investors. Nothing concrete, but definitely leads." He punctuated his sentence with a tired smile. "Let's not talk about it right now. I'm exhausted." Elena pressed her lips together. She'd been hearing the same spiel for weeks. Late nights, extended networking sessions, yet no job offers, no real mention of a business plan. She missed the days when they shared every hope and fear, when he would come home excited to recount the details of his day. She also noticed the smell of perfume lingering on his collar, not the usual cologne he liked to wear. She wanted to say something about the unfamiliar scent, but the words got lost in her throat. Instead, she told herself she was overthinking. The next few nights followed a similar pattern. Malik would leave the house claiming he was meeting a friend of a friend, who had gallery connections. He'd promised to be back by dinner, only to sneak in well after midnight with half-baked excuses. This guy is an important collector, we couldn't just stop talking, or they wanted to introduce me to someone else. Elena's suspicions grew stronger, but she reasoned that perhaps he was under pressure. When people were desperate to establish a business, they'd network heavily, right? She tried to empathize. After all, she'd seen Malik at his best, creative, unstoppable, and full of dreams. Maybe these outings were the seeds that would blossom into the success he craved. Still, it stung that he didn't think to text her updates. He'd once been more considerate. Each time he came home, a flicker of guilt would dart across his face. She couldn't decide if it was just the stress of joblessness or something else. She tried to brush aside the doubts because tomorrow was their anniversary. She refused to let suspicion overshadow the celebration she had planned. But in the back of her mind, Elena couldn't ignore the feeling. She recalled an old adage her mother used to say, "When something feels off, it usually is." For the first time since she met Malik, Elena wondered if her unwavering faith was being misplaced. The questions simmered, but she held them at bay, hoping the next day's festivities would restore her confidence in their love. Morning broke with a soft glow filtering through the bedroom curtains. Elena peeled herself from the bed, feeling the weight of another double shift tugging at her bones. She'd come home late from the hospital last night. Malik had already been out networking when she arrived. Despite her own exhaustion, she was determined to make their anniversary dinner special. By the time she got to the hospital, the corridors buzzed with doctors, nurses, and patients flowing in constant motion. She tried to keep her mind on her work, checking vitals, comforting anxious families, and administering medications. Still, her thoughts drifted to the envelope tucked away at home. It felt surreal that by this evening, she'd be revealing a gift that could potentially change their lives. During her break, she slipped into the staff lounge and pulled out her phone, scrolling through her notes of things to do. She needed to pick up his favorite tiramisu from the bakery across the street. Then she planned to swing by the jewelry store to give her wedding ring a quick cleaning. She wanted every detail to be perfect, her ring shining, his dessert decadent. A text notification buzzed. "Malik, good morning, babe. Let's go out tonight. There's a new bistro downtown I've been wanting to try." Relief and excitement mingled in Elena's chest. He remembered. Maybe he really did care. Maybe he was just under a lot of pressure. She typed back a quick reply. "Sure, can't wait. Love you." The hours dragged. She changed bedpans, calmed a crying patient whose family was stuck in traffic, and performed her charting with methodical precision. By the time 5 p.m. rolled around, her feet ached and her eyes felt heavy. But she refused to give in to the fatigue. Today was important. Elena clocked out, waving goodbye to her co-workers, who teased her about her anniversary plans. She rushed out of the hospital and into her car, heart pounding with anticipation. She thought about the $15,000 check. That sum of money was no small feat for a nurse like her. But she knew how much it meant to Malik, how much it meant to both of them for him to follow his passion. As she inched through rush-hour traffic, she imagined how the evening would unfold, a romantic dinner at the new bistro, the two of them laughing over how they first met, then a small gift exchange. He'd be overwhelmed by the check, by her belief in him. They would sip wine and talk about the future, drafting new dreams, forging a stronger bond. Little did she know that the night would not end with sweet toasts and shared visions. Instead, it would catapult her into the hardest lesson of her life. But for now, Elena's heart remained light, buoyed by the hope that love and dreams were enough to keep them together. Early that afternoon, Elena's phone buzzed in her purse. She was grabbing a latte before heading home to freshen up. She fished it out and found a notification from a friend's Instagram story. The group chat of mutual friends often lit up with fun party clips, cat memes, and random motivational quotes. She almost skipped it. She was too busy juggling errands. But her curiosity got the better of her. The clip showed a rooftop party from the previous night, a sweeping view of the city's skyline behind a crowd of dancing, laughing guests. The caption read, "Always a vibe when we link up." A few seconds into the footage, a familiar profile entered the background of the shot. Malik. Elena's heart stumbled. He was dressed in a stylish blazer she'd never seen before. He stood close, very close, to a woman with long wavy hair, her body leaning into his. The camera panned away just as he wrapped an arm around her waist. Elena replayed the video, her stomach flipping. The woman's face was partially obscured, but there was no mistaking Malik's posture, casual yet intimately familiar. It didn't look like a mere friend or colleague. There was an undeniable tension in the way they stood. A pang of betrayal rippled through her, but she fought it back, reasoning that maybe it was an old friend, or a colleague. Quickly, she typed a message in the group chat. "Hey, who's that in the background next to Malik? Where was this party?" The group responded with the usual barrage of excited comments. One friend said they thought the woman was some influencer or local personality. Another friend, more blunt, wrote, "No idea, but they looked pretty cozy." Sweat beaded on Elena's forehead. She stared at the phone, her latte growing cold in her hand. She forced herself to breathe, to remain calm. She told herself this could still be innocent. Malik had been talking about meeting art investors. Influencers sometimes get involved with new galleries, right? It could be purely professional. But the part of her that had been pushing down nagging doubts felt an electric jolt. Instead of firing off accusatory texts to Malik, she resolved to bring it up tonight, calmly, after their anniversary dinner. If he told her it was a misunderstood scenario, maybe she'd believe him. After all, this was Malik, the man who once lovingly presented her with a poem he'd written just for her. The man who had tears in his eyes when they exchanged vows. She had to give him a chance to explain. With a shaky exhale, Elena tucked her phone away and continued on. She still had to pick up the tiramisu. She still wanted to refresh her makeup before dinner. She'd handle this as soon as they were alone. But a dark cloud loomed over what was supposed to be a celebratory night, threatening to unravel the surprise she'd worked so hard to create. Back at home, Elena set the tiramisu in the fridge and looked at the clock. 6 p.m. Malik had texted that he'd pick her up around 7. She had just enough time to shower and change into something nice. She settled on a flowing emerald green dress that matched her eyes, hoping to spark a memory of happier times. As she stood at the mirror applying a subtle gloss to her lips, her mind churned with questions. Why hadn't Malik mentioned last night's party to her? Why did he come home so late, claiming it was a networking dinner? She thought of the girl from the video, her body angled intimately toward him. But as quickly as those worries surfaced, Elena shoved them away. It was their anniversary, for goodness sake. She had spent so much effort planning a sweet surprise. She didn't want to spoil the evening by accusing him of something unproven. No matter what she felt, she knew leading with suspicion could set them on a collision course. She decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, at least for tonight. When the doorbell rang, her heart fluttered. It felt like a date night from the early days of their relationship, before jobs and bills weighed them down. She opened the door to find Malik, dressed in a crisp black button-down and dark slacks, a thin smile on his face. He handed her a single rose. "Happy anniversary," he said. She melted, letting the sweet gesture momentarily assuage her fears. "Happy anniversary," she echoed softly, stepping forward to kiss him. He let her kiss linger for a second before pulling away. On the drive to the bistro, Elena tried to keep the conversation light. "How was your day?" she asked, careful to keep her tone neutral. He shrugged. "You know, same old job hunt. A couple of phone calls, a networking brunch. Nothing solid yet." It was on the tip of her tongue to mention the Instagram video, but she stopped herself. She wanted to see if he'd volunteer any details on his own. If he was hiding something, maybe he'd slip up. But he gave nothing away. Instead, he reached over and squeezed her hand. "Thanks for sticking by me," he said. "I know it's been a rough patch, but I promise things are going to get better." She felt that familiar tug at her heart, a blend of love, loyalty, and a hint of doubt. But for now, she decided to embrace his words. They arrived at the bistro, stepping into an ambience of soft jazz and dim, romantic lighting. Tonight was meant to be special, and she was determined not to let a questionable Instagram story destroy it. And so, even as they toasted with wine and smiled at each other across the candlelit table, Elena's heart twisted with unspoken questions. For the sake of this special evening, she would ignore the red flags. But she sensed, deep down, that ignoring them wouldn't make them disappear. After dinner, Malik and Elena strolled along the dimly lit sidewalk. The temperature had dipped slightly, sending a gentle breeze through Elena's hair. She tightened her grip around his arm, trying to recapture the warmth of the evening. She led him toward their parked car, then paused under a street lamp. "There's something I want to give you," she said, her voice trembling with excitement and a hint of nerves. He cocked an eyebrow curiously. "You got me a gift? That's sweet, but you shouldn't have." Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a small white envelope. Inside was the carefully written check for $15,000, her 2 years of scrimping and saving. She handed the envelope to him, her cheeks glowing with anticipation. His eyes flicked to hers before he opened it. At first, the expression on his face was unreadable. Then he pulled out the slip of paper. He froze, scanning the number and the signature. His eyes widened. "What?" he stammered. "Elena, this is too much." She smiled, though her heart hammered. "I know it's not enough to open a massive gallery right away, but it's a start. I believe in you." Malik swallowed hard, glancing back at the numbers. For a moment, a genuine spark flashed in his eyes. He seemed touched, even overwhelmed. But then, just as quickly, that spark faded. He folded the check and put it back in the envelope, forcing a wide grin. "Elena, I appreciate this more than you know. You're the best wife a guy could ask for." She felt something was off in the way he said it, like a practiced response. But she let the feeling go. She focused on the possibility that her gift might reignite his passion for the gallery. They got into the car, and Elena continued to gush. "We could lease a small storefront in the arts district, or maybe find a shared space to cut down on rent. I even know a few nurse colleagues who paint on the side and might want to display their work." She pictured them brainstorming together, envisioning a vibrant future. Malik nodded along, but he offered no fresh ideas of his own. Instead, he steered the conversation toward practical concerns: permits, marketing budgets, the pressure of the economy. It was almost as if he were trying to dampen the moment, to make it less real. Yet she chalked it up to normal hesitation. Real life was more complicated than dreams. Still, there was a part of her that was disappointed. She'd hoped for tears of gratitude or a fervent promise to make the best use of her sacrifice. Instead, his reaction felt like relief mixed with an unexplained tension. When they got home, he said he was tired and went straight to bed. Elena stood in the living room, the envelope now resting on the kitchen counter. She stared at the spot where he'd placed it, feeling a bittersweet swirl of hope and doubt. She wanted so badly for that money to pave a road to a better life. For him, for them. But in that quiet moment, she couldn't shake the sense that her gift had set something else in motion, something she couldn't quite define. Elena woke up early, her mind already swirling with ideas about how to help Malik get his gallery off the ground. Despite her exhaustion, she pulled out a notepad and started scribbling potential leads for small business loans, art community meetups, and local festivals where Malik could spread the word. But Malik seemed unusually distant that morning. He kept glancing at his phone, tapping out quick messages. Whenever she asked who he was texting, he'd mumble something about business connections or potential leads. She tried to remain upbeat. "Hey, I was thinking we could drive around the arts district today, just to see if there's any for lease signs that might catch our eye. What do you say?" He hesitated, eyes flicking to his phone again. I actually have another networking dinner tonight. An important one," he said. Elena's heart sank. "On our anniversary weekend? You just went to one last night." He shrugged. "I know it's inconvenient, but these guys aren't always available. I can't risk missing an opportunity." She forced a smile. "All right. Text me the location. Maybe I'll come by after my shift and say hello." His reaction was immediate. No, don't do that. It's not that kind of event. I don't want to look unprofessional. She tried not to let his words sting, but they did. They reminded her of the Instagram clip where he had been anything but professional with that mystery woman. Still, she nodded, conceding. If this was truly about business, she didn't want to derail it. Later that afternoon, she got dressed for work, her mind stuck on Malik's new routine of networking. There was a time he would have been thrilled to have her join him, proud to introduce her to his colleagues or mentors. Now it was as though he'd built a separate world she wasn't allowed to enter. When she returned home that evening, the apartment was eerily quiet. She texted Malik to say she was back, but hours passed without a response. Midnight rolled around, then 1 a.m., and still no sign of him. By 2 a.m., worry had turned into anger and sadness. She tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. Her mind jumped to worst-case scenarios. Maybe he'd been in an accident. But then she remembered the video from the other night, the mysterious woman with him. The ring of suspicion in her head grew louder. It wasn't until nearly 4 in the morning that she heard the click of the door. Elena sat in the dark living room, arms crossed, eyes red from fatigue and tears. Malik entered, the smell of perfume on him again, a faint grin plastered on his face that quickly faded when he saw her awake. "What are you doing up so late?" he asked, sounding more defensive than concerned. "I was worried," she replied simply. "You could have answered your phone." He mumbled an apology, blaming a dead battery. But she could see the phone bulging in his pocket, lit with notifications. His face revealed no genuine remorse. They went to bed without another word. That night, Elena's pillow caught her silent tears. The illusions of a perfect anniversary gift and a loving partnership began to dissolve, leaving her with the raw, gnawing truth that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only woman in Malik's life. Morning light trickled through the blinds. Elena stirred, her body stiff from restless sleep. She glanced over to Malik's side of the bed. It was empty, the sheets cold. A rush of anxiety shot through her. Where was he now? She checked the time, 6:45 a.m. For a moment, she hoped he was simply in the bathroom or the kitchen making coffee. But a quick look around the apartment proved otherwise. Malik was gone, no note, no text. She sank onto the living room couch, knees pulled to her chest. The envelope with the check was still on the counter, just as he had left it. One might think if he was serious about launching his dream, that check would be on the top of his to-do list, fueling immediate plans. But it sat there, untouched. Her phone buzzed. She pounced on it, hoping it was Malik, but it was just a notification from her bank. She logged into her account and noticed a recent charge from a high-end jewelry store. She had no recollection of making that purchase. Could Malik have bought something? Maybe he was preparing a belated gift for their anniversary, she thought, momentarily brightening. Or was it something else? She called him, but again it went to voicemail. By 8 a.m., she was showered and dressed for another shift at the hospital. Her heart felt heavy with unresolved tension. She considered confronting him that evening, demanding answers about his whereabouts and that mysterious jewelry store charge. But a part of her feared what she might discover. All day at work, she fought to maintain composure. Patients needed her full attention, not a distracted mind. But whenever she had a spare moment, she found herself replaying every suspicious sign. The late nights, the Instagram clip, the repeated references to networking events. The perfume. The jewelry store purchase. By the time her shift ended, she was a bundle of nerves. She drove home, scanning the apartment parking lot for Malik's car. It was there. Relief and dread swirled together. At least he was home safe, but now she had to face him. She walked in to find him slouched on the couch, scrolling through social media on his phone. He looked up, gave her a quick nod, then returned his gaze to the screen. "Hey," she said quietly. "Where'd you go this morning?" "Had a meeting with a potential investor," he replied casually, not bothering to elaborate. She bit her lip. "Malik, I feel like I'm in the dark. What's going on with you?" "With us." He placed his phone down, looking mildly annoyed. "I'm just trying to get this business started, okay?" I'm sorry if that means I'm not around as much. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to cling to the idea that all these late nights and absences would culminate in a grand success story for them both. But something felt terribly off. In that instant, she decided she couldn't ignore her intuition anymore. Whatever secrets Malik was harboring, Elena was on the brink of uncovering them, whether she was ready or not. Despite the sinking feeling in her stomach, Elena tried to approach the situation logically. She needed concrete evidence, not just her suspicions. That's how she justified her decision to follow him. She'd never stooped to this level before, but desperation had a way of pushing people out of their comfort zones. Malik announced the next day that he had another networking dinner, this time at a downtown hotel known for its upscale bar scene. Elena noted the name with a measured nod, but inside her heart pounded. She waited until Malik left, giving him a good 20-minute head start, then slipped into her car and drove across town. Traffic was thick, a tangle of red brake lights and impatient horns. Every delay gnawed at Elena's nerves. By the time she reached the hotel, she worried she might have missed him entirely. She parked discreetly and scanned the lobby, then the bar area. No sign of Malik. She took the elevator to the rooftop lounge, an urban oasis of plush seating, string lights, and panoramic skyline views. Stepping onto the rooftop, Elena immediately felt out of place in her casual attire amid the glamorous crowd. But she forced herself to move forward, discreetly looking for Malik's familiar silhouette. Soft music played in the background, and clusters of well-dressed people sipped cocktails. Her pulse raced as she inched around the perimeter, her eyes darting from face to face. And then she saw him. Malik stood near a sleek marble bar, holding a glass of champagne, laughing at something a woman next to him had said. Elena's heart pounded, each beat echoing in her ears. The woman turned slightly, and Elena recognized the wavy hair from the Instagram video. Her face was fully visible now, striking features, meticulously applied makeup, and a confident smile that sent a shiver up Elena's spine. She watched as the woman leaned in, touching Malik's arm in a flirty gesture. Malik responded by slipping his hand around her waist. A feeling of nausea rolled through Elena. This was no mere business contact. She ducked behind a tall planter, her breath ragged. Part of her wanted to march over and demand an explanation. Another part wanted to flee. After all, the truth was laid bare before her. Malik was cheating. There was no hiding from the raw hurt she felt, the betrayal that seared through her chest. Elena forced herself to remain calm. She needed proof. If she confronted him now, he'd spin some excuse. Instead, she steadied her trembling hands and pulled out her phone, preparing to capture the moment. It felt invasive, and she hated stooping to such a level, but something inside her snapped. She was done being the unsuspecting fool. Holding her breath, she pressed the record button. Through the lens, she watched as Malik and the mystery woman clinked their champagne glasses, then leaned in as if sharing a private joke. The woman's laugh was audible even over the lounge music. Elena's stomach churned with anger, sadness, and a strange sense of liberation, because now she had concrete evidence of Malik's deception. Elena's hand trembled as she kept her phone aimed at the pair. She zoomed in slightly, trying to capture their faces clearly. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to stop, but she persisted. This was the moment she had to face, however painful. She fought to steady her breathing. Adrenaline coursed through her veins as she recorded Malik laughing easily, kissing the woman's cheek, and letting his hand linger on her waist. Even from a distance, Elena could see the woman's radiant smile. They looked like a couple deeply in love, blissfully unaware of the world around them, or of the wife who stood just a few feet away, phone in hand, heart in shreds. Finally, Elena tapped the stop button, saving the video to her phone. Her eyes stung with hot tears threatening to spill. She wanted to step forward and shout at him, to demand an explanation. But her gut told her it wouldn't matter. The image of Malik's betrayal was etched into her memory now, impossible to erase or rationalize away. She backed away carefully, clutching her phone to her chest. Slipping into the elevator, she all but collapsed against the mirrored wall, letting out a shaky exhale. Her mind spun. So many late nights, so many lies. This was the proof. Cameras didn't lie. On her drive home, Her thoughts spiraled. She replayed their wedding day in her mind, the white dress, the friends and family cheering them on, the vows they had spoken. For better or for worse, till death do us part. And yet, here they were. She wondered how long this affair had been going on. Had it started before she'd given him the check? Was she just an unwitting benefactor, financing his life while he enjoyed someone else's company? The realization stung like salt on an open wound. Arriving at the apartment, she almost expected Malik to be there, ready with some hollow excuse. But the place was empty. She tossed her purse on the couch, collapsed on the armchair, and opened the video on her phone again, forcing herself to watch it. It felt surreal, like an out-of-body experience. The man in the video looked so carefree, a stranger. She hardly recognized him as the same person who once wrote her poetry. Elena scrolled through her phone's camera roll, pausing at old photos of them, smiling and happy. The contrast was jarring. The video she'd just taken shattered every illusion she had clung to. Cameras, after all, don't lie, they only capture reality. And the reality was that Malik had abandoned his marriage in every meaningful sense. With a heavy sigh, she pressed her forehead against her phone. She didn't know where to go from here, but she knew she'd never see Malik, or herself, the same way again. Elena spent the rest of the evening pacing the apartment, her emotions ricocheting between raw heartbreak and seething anger. She replayed the rooftop scene in her mind, the clinking champagne flutes, the easy intimacy between Malik and his mistress. She almost smashed her phone against the wall when it buzzed with a text. She half expected it to be Malik with yet another lame excuse. Instead, it was her best friend, Carmen, checking in. Elena typed a shaky response. Need to talk. Tomorrow. Carmen immediately replied, of course. Any time. Hours ticked by without any sign of Malik. Around midnight, Elena heard the jingle of keys in the door. She shut off the TV and braced herself in the living room, arms crossed. He stepped in, wearing that same smug grin she'd seen in the video, except now it vanished the moment he noticed the look on her face. She remained silent, watching him fumble with his words. "Elena," he started. "You're still awake?" Her lips pressed together. She fought the urge to ask a million questions. Instead, she let the quiet tension fill the space. She could see he was uncomfortable, shifting from one foot to the other, eyes casting about for some lifeline of conversation. "Work run late?" she asked, injecting sarcasm into the question. Malik rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, sort of. She couldn't stomach the lies. Without warning, she stood up, brushed past him, and went to the bedroom. Her heart pounded, and tears prickled at the corners of her eyes. She couldn't confront him. Not yet. She feared what might spill out if she did: rage, heartbreak, a total meltdown. She heard him sigh, then shuffle around the apartment, presumably heading to the couch. The next morning, she found him already gone, a brief note on the counter. Went out for coffee. Be back soon. It was so ordinary, so mundane, it made her blood boil. He had just come home from being with another woman, and all he could muster was a casual note about coffee? She glanced at the kitchen sink and noticed 2 champagne flutes, their rims sticky with leftover bubbles. Confusion gripped her. They hadn't been there the night before. She picked one up, noticing a faint lipstick mark on the rim, definitely not hers. She trembled, bile rising in her throat. Had he brought that woman here, to their home, after she'd gone to bed? In that moment, Elena's resolve hardened. She had spent months turning a blind eye. She had quietly saved money to fund his dreams. She had worked long hours, swallowing every ounce of suspicion. But this was a new level of betrayal, defiling the space where they slept and shared their lives. Setting the flute down with trembling hands, she realized the time for confrontation had come. She would no longer let him weasel out of this. She deserved answers, and if he couldn't provide them, she'd find them herself. No more illusions, no more second chances. Elena decided to uncover exactly where all their shared money was going. She logged into their joint bank account. She already knew about the high-end jewelry purchase, but she wanted to see the details. Sure enough, the transaction showed up as Delacroix Jewelers, $4,200. Her heart thudded. That was more than she'd spent on her own wedding ring. Could Malik have bought it for her? The thought flickered briefly. Maybe this was some grand gesture. But then she remembered the unknown woman in the rooftop footage, the champagne flutes with the lipstick mark. A wave of nausea hit her as a deeper realization set in. She might have helped fund that ring with the anniversary money. That check she'd given him was intended to jumpstart his gallery. Instead, it appeared to be financing his affair. Elena closed her laptop, tears blurring her vision. She thought back to the moment she handed him the envelope, how her heart brimmed with hope. Now all she felt was profound anger and betrayal. She needed to know if that ring was truly meant for another woman. An hour later, Malik walked in. She locked eyes with him, crossing her arms. "Where were you?" He stepped back, startled by her confrontational tone. "I told you, I went out for coffee." "I see," she said. "So, a $4,200 coffee run? Is that what's going on?" He blinked, his guard up. "What are you talking about?" She grabbed her phone, opened the bank statement, and held it out. "This charge at Delacroix Jewelers, explain it." For a second, panic flickered across his face. He hesitated, then forced a laugh. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. I was just looking at a potential investment piece. You know, for resale later. A friend told me about." "Stop lying," Elena snapped, tears threatening to spill. "You bought a ring. Who is it for?" He swallowed hard. "Why are you being so dramatic?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Because you disappeared last night, and I found champagne flutes in the sink this morning, one with lipstick that clearly isn't mine. And now I learned that you bought a ring with our money." Malik's face hardened. He opened his mouth to defend himself but found no words. His eyes darted away, and that was all Elena needed. The truth stood between them, unspoken but undeniable. "Is she worth it?" Elena asked quietly. "Worth throwing away our marriage for a fling?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Finally, he managed, "It's not what you think. I'm just in a confusing place." Elena closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You proposed to someone else, didn't you? You bought her a ring." Malik just stood there in agonizing silence. That was confirmation enough. Elena let out a shaky breath, feeling something inside her break. She turned away, each step feeling like a weight pressing down on her. She headed into the bedroom and closed the door, leaving him alone with his silence, and her shattered heart. Time seemed to stand still as Elena locked herself in the bedroom. She slid down to the floor, pressing her back against the door, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her mind reeled with disjointed memories, snippets of their wedding, tender moments they'd shared, late-night pillow talks filled with laughter. She clutched her phone, resisting the urge to text Carmen or her mother. She wasn't ready to hear the pity or the possible, "I told you so." She needed a moment to herself, to absorb what had just happened. From the living room, she heard faint sounds of Malik moving around. The knowledge of his presence felt suffocating. She wondered how many times he'd stood in this very apartment, texting Tessa, that other woman, making plans. Every moment replayed in her mind like a cruel montage, highlighting her naivete. An hour later, the doorknob jiggled. "Elena!" Malik's voice drifted in, subdued. "Can we talk?" Her mouth felt dry. She had nothing to say. And yet her heart still ached for him. That duality, loving someone and hating them in the same breath, was foreign to her. She'd never felt it so powerfully before. "I need space," she finally called out. He let out a weary sigh. "All right. I'll give you space. But I want to fix this, somehow." She wanted to scream that he couldn't fix something he'd willfully destroyed. But she kept quiet. She heard him step away, the front door opening and closing soon after. Relief and anguish filled her simultaneously. Exhaustion overcame her. She pulled herself onto the bed and stared at the ceiling, tears still slipping from her eyes. She tried to recall every detail of the rooftop lounge video she had taken. The way he touched Tessa, how comfortable they seemed together. She felt something akin to whiplash, trying to reconcile that version of Malik with the man she married. Eventually, she cried herself into a restless sleep. She dreamt of their wedding day again, except this time, when she lifted her veil, she saw Tessa's face staring back at her, laughing. She jolted awake, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding as though she'd run a marathon. In the darkness of the bedroom, she heard only the faint hum of the refrigerator. Malik hadn't returned. She wanted answers, but she also wanted him gone. The conflict tore her up inside, making it impossible to find any peace. She wondered if it was all her fault. Maybe she'd focused too much on work. Maybe she hadn't been supportive enough. But then she shook away the self-blame. Even if their marriage had rocky patches, it didn't justify betrayal. That night, she didn't hear from him again. The silence in the apartment was deafening, yet strangely comforting. She needed that shattered silence to finally look at the truth she'd been avoiding. Her marriage was falling apart, and there was no quick fix in sight. Elena woke up with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. She groaned, recalling the emotional warfare of the previous day. She knew she had to function. Life didn't simply pause for heartbreak. She forced herself to get dressed and headed to the living room, only to find it empty. Malik hadn't returned overnight. In a surge of anger and hurt, she decided to create a burn book, a journal of sorts where she'd vent every raw thought. She rummaged through a drawer and pulled out a spiral notebook. For the next hour, she scribbled down everything: her confusion, her rage, her heartbreak. Each page dripped with emotion, each pen stroke a cathartic release. Why did he do this? How long has this been going on? Was I never enough? Her handwriting scrawled wildly, tears occasionally smearing the ink. She documented every suspicion that had lurked in the corners of her mind for months. She wrote about the first nights he came home late, the perfume on his collar, the Instagram video, and finally, the ring. Writing it all out provided a strange relief, as though she were transferring a heavy burden from her heart onto the pages. She dubbed it her burn book, because she vowed that once she was done healing, she'd burn it, letting the ashes carry away her pain. Eventually, she closed the notebook, hands trembling. She looked at the time. She was late for work. With one last glance around the empty apartment, she grabbed her keys and left. The burned book stayed on the coffee table, a testament to her heartbreak but also to her courage to face it head-on. Throughout her shift at the hospital, Elena found her mind drifting back to those pages. She replayed the words in her head, as if reading a script for a tragedy she never consented to star in. But channeling her anger into writing had given her a slight edge. It reminded her that she wasn't powerless. She had a voice, even if it was only heard by the lined pages of a spiral notebook. By the time she clocked out, she felt marginally lighter. She returned home to find Malik's keys on the counter, but no sign of him. In the bedroom, she noticed that some of his clothes were gone. An uneasy calm settled over her. Without a word exchanged, he was leaving. And oddly, that hurt less than she expected. Maybe it was a temporary arrangement, or maybe he was gone for good. Either way, she felt a new resolve forming within her. She'd let her burn book bear the brunt of her pain. For now, she had bigger plans, like gathering every piece of evidence and protecting herself, both emotionally and legally. She wouldn't be caught off guard again. Let Malik keep his secrets. Elena was done living in the dark. Over the next few days, Elena channeled her turmoil into action. She gathered bank statements, credit card bills, and text message exchanges. She combed through every digital footprint, determined to piece together the extent of Malik's deceptions. Late into the night, she sat at her computer, printouts strewn across the dining table. She created folders labeled Evidence, Finances, Evidence, Communication, and Possible Addresses/Associates. The check for $15,000 still lingered in her mind, but even that felt like a drop in the bucket compared to the mounting revelations. She found suspicious payments to fancy restaurants on nights Malik claimed to be job hunting. There were Uber rides to addresses in parts of town she'd never visited. The purchase of that ring stood out like a neon sign of betrayal. She took screenshots of everything, emailing them to a backup account, just in case he tried to wipe any records. Occasionally, Her phone buzzed with calls or texts from Malik. She ignored them. She was beyond listening to half-baked excuses. After a day of silence, he would send a lengthy text about how stressed he was, how he made a mistake but still loved her. She'd read each message with a hollow feeling, uncertain whether she felt more contempt or pity. One evening, as she was organizing screenshots, she noticed a pattern in the transactions. He'd systematically withdrawn small amounts of cash every other day. It added up to a few $1,000s over several months. Where was that money going? She suspected it was related to his mistress, Tessa, as she'd learned from social media profiles. But a gnawing sense of betrayal grew as she realized he'd used their joint funds for another woman. Fueling her resolve, she also backed up the rooftop lounge video in multiple cloud storage locations. She didn't know yet how she'd use it, but she wanted the evidence safe. Perhaps part of her was planning for the inevitability of divorce proceedings. Another part fantasized about exposing Malik publicly, the way he'd humiliated her privately. That night, she wrote in her burn book again, detailing her progress. She described how cathartic it felt to reclaim some control. For too long, she'd been the unsuspecting wife, fueling his ambitions with her hard-earned money. Now, she was ready to be more than just the wounded party. She had the evidence, the heartbreak, and the impetus to make sure he couldn't twist the narrative. As she finally turned off her laptop, she glanced at her phone. One new text from Malik: "I'm sorry. Let's talk." She stared at the screen, then locked it without responding. She was done with talking. Now, it was time for action. Elena's resolve crystallized the next morning. She needed professional help. Emotions were running too high for her to navigate this betrayal alone. She looked up a reputable divorce attorney, scheduling an initial consultation for the following week. The heaviness of the decision weighed on her. This was not what she ever wanted, to consider ending her marriage. But Malik's actions had left her with little choice. She sat in her car outside the attorney's office, staring at the tinted windows, heart pounding. When she finally mustered the courage to go in, she was greeted by a sharp-eyed paralegal who ushered her into a sleek conference room. The attorney listened patiently as Elena laid out her concerns: marital asset misuse, potential fraud regarding the $15,000 she'd saved, and, most painfully, the affair. Elena handed over the folder of screenshots, bank statements, and the video footage. The attorney's expression remained composed. "We have enough grounds to file for divorce," she said evenly. "Possibly more, depending on how these assets were used and if there was deception in how they were obtained." Elena nodded, tears threatening to surface, but she blinked them away. This was the kind of clarity she needed. Facts, not emotions. She left the office with a folder of paperwork and a sense of grim determination. Next, she reached out to a private investigator, recommended by the attorney. She wasn't sure if she had enough evidence to prove any legal wrongdoing beyond typical adultery, but she wanted every piece of the puzzle. The investigator, an older man named Nick, promised to discreetly gather more information on Malik's whereabouts and finances. Elena felt a strange mixture of empowerment and sorrow as she headed home. She was taking charge of her life, even though the steps were painful. The thought of finalizing a divorce felt like stepping off a cliff. Yet staying in a lie felt even more dangerous. Later that evening, Malik tried calling her again. She refused to pick up. Instead, she typed a single text: "We'll speak through our lawyers." She didn't expect him to take it well, but she didn't care. The time for illusions was over. She spent the rest of the night shredding old documents and packing some of Malik's belongings into boxes. Each item felt like a tiny weight being lifted off her shoulders. She set the boxes in the corner of the living room, a visual reminder of the path she was on. It was a path she never asked for, but she knew she had to walk it now, for her own sanity and self-respect. Elena's next move was subtle yet strategic. She knew Tessa was a social media influencer. Her Instagram page was filled with glossy selfies, brand collaborations, and event promos. Even though it made Elena's blood boil, she followed the account under a new, anonymous profile. For days, she scrolled through Tessa's feed, piecing together the timeline of the affair. Tessa's posts offered cryptic references: a rooftop lounge with a mystery man, a new diamond ring with a caption about new beginnings, and snapshots of expensive dinners that matched Malik's suspicious transactions. The gall of it infuriated Elena, but she stayed cool. This was chess, not checkers. Meanwhile, Elena posted a simple, cryptic story on her own Instagram, just a selfie with no tears or heartbreak visible, her expression calm, accompanied by the caption, "The truth always comes out." She added no further explanation, no direct accusations. Within hours, she noticed mutual friends and acquaintances messaging her with concern, "Are you okay? What's going on, Elena?" She offered no real details, just a polite, "I'm fine. Taking some time for myself." But the seeds of speculation were planted. People started connecting the dots, noticing Malik's absence in her posts, whispering about Tessa's suspicious ring. Rumors spread like wildfire in their shared social circles. It was exactly what Elena intended, a controlled leak of her side of the story without having to voice the ugliness directly. Malik caught wind of it, of course. One afternoon, she received a frantic voicemail from him, accusing her of airing their dirty laundry online, threatening to tell everyone the real story. She simply deleted the message. She knew he was running scared, desperate to maintain whatever image he had left. Over the next few days, Tessa's followers began to question her as well. Under her ring photo, comments popped up, "That ring looks familiar. Isn't that Malik's wife's ring?" And, "Girl, are you sure he's single?" Tessa initially brushed off these comments, ignoring or deleting them. But the chatter continued to grow. Elena watched it all unfold from her anonymous account, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Part of her despised using social media as a weapon, but another part relished the justice. This wasn't just petty drama. Malik had robbed her of emotional security, her savings, and her dignity. She wouldn't sit by silently and let them thrive on lies. It was a slow burn, but Elena saw the tide beginning to turn. Sometimes, exposing the truth didn't require loud accusations, just a well-placed nudge and the unstoppable force of the internet's curiosity. Elena decided the time had come for a more direct approach. She created a burner account on Instagram, something neither Malik nor Tessa would recognize. After posting a few benign stock photos to make it look legitimate, she carefully drafted a message to Tessa's sponsors and collaborators. She attached the rooftop lounge video, along with a succinct explanation. Influencer Tessa is involved in unethical behavior, including fraud and deception, funded by the stolen marital assets of her partner's wife. She hit send to a handful of Tessa's brand partners. Then she posted the same video to Tessa's own feed, tagging relevant parties. She did so without malicious language, letting the footage speak for itself. It didn't take long for the blowback to begin. Tessa's comment section exploded. Outraged fans demanded an explanation, some calling her a homewrecker, others calling for boycotts of the brands she represented. Sponsors, eager to avoid scandal, quietly began removing her endorsements. One brand even issued a public statement distancing itself from Tessa, citing recent revelations contrary to our corporate values. Within hours, Tessa's once vibrant page turned into a battleground of accusations and defenses. In a panicked move, Tessa disabled comments on several posts, then switched her account to private. But the damage had been done. Screenshots and re-uploads of the video circulated on various platforms, fueling the flames. Elena watched from the sidelines, her emotions roiling. On one hand, she felt vindicated, seeing the woman who had wrecked her marriage face consequences. On the other, she felt a pang of guilt for orchestrating such a public takedown. She reminded herself that Tessa was no innocent bystander. She had flaunted her affair, knowingly engaging with a married man and benefiting from Elena's hard-earned money. That evening, she sat in her quiet living room, the hum of the fridge and the buzz of her phone the only sounds. She looked at her reflection in the dark TV screen. She barely recognized the person she'd become, someone who would send scandalous evidence to brand partners. But then she thought of the ring, the lies, the check. She remembered how many nights she'd cried herself to sleep while Malik and Tessa gallivanted around town. This was the reality she hadn't chosen, but she would survive it. As she scrolled through the final wave of notifications, she felt a strange calm settle over her. There was no going back now. Malik and Tessa's secrets were laid bare, and the internet had latched onto the story like a dog with a bone. Elena's heartbreak was still real, still raw, but for the first time, she sensed a measure of justice being served. The aftermath hit Malik and Tessa like a tidal wave. Tessa's influencer deals started dropping within a week. Her brand endorsements vanished as swiftly as they had appeared. Fans turned against her, calling her out for profiting from a relationship built on lies. Gossip pages latched onto the scandal, sharing screenshots of the lounge video, the cancelled sponsorships, and even Tessa's hasty responses that did little to quell the outrage. Malik's reputation wasn't spared either. Mutual friends who once admired his art dreams now avoided him, appalled by his betrayal. Word got around that he'd used Elena's savings to wine and dine Tessa. He tried to deny it, but the bank statements told a different story. A local online publication picked up the scandal, labeling it as a cautionary tale of the con man and the influencer. Elena heard varying accounts of Malik's attempts to salvage his image. Some said he was couch surfing at a friend's place. Others claimed he was staying in motels, jobless and desperate. She didn't bother confirming the rumors, though part of her took grim satisfaction in knowing he was suffering consequences. Meanwhile, her own life was in upheaval. She found herself toggling between intense sorrow and fierce determination. She'd cry over the shattered remains of her marriage one moment, and then fire off an email to her lawyer the next. The chaos swirling around them all made her head spin. Late one night, Malik called from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. His voice trembled with anger and desperation. "Why are you doing this to me? You ruined my life, Elena." She was stunned by the audacity. "I ruined your life? You cheated on me, used my savings for your affair, and lied to my face." He sputtered a flurry of excuses. "It just happened. Tessa and I connected. You were never around. You were always working, leaving me lonely. I made mistakes, but this backlash is insane." A wave of cold fury washed over her. "If you want to blame someone, blame yourself. Actions have consequences, Malik. Goodbye." She hung up, heart racing. It dawned on her that she still loved him once, that she never would have imagined speaking to him with such detachment. But the web of deceit he'd spun left her no choice. He had unraveled their life together, not her. As Tessa's follower count dropped by the thousands and Malik's phone calls turned from angry to pathetic pleas, Elena couldn't help but think that perhaps karma was real. It didn't heal her pain or make the betrayal vanish, but it offered some measure of closure. The day of their court hearing was overcast, a dull gray sky reflecting Elena's subdued mood. She arrived at the courthouse in a sharp blazer, clutching a portfolio of evidence. Her lawyer walked beside her, calm and professional, offering a reassuring nod now and then. Malik appeared in the hallway, looking haggard in an ill-fitted suit. He avoided her gaze, instead focusing on something invisible on the floor. A quiet tension pulsed between them as they entered the small courtroom. Proceedings moved swiftly. The judge reviewed the case: marital asset fraud, emotional distress, and the dissolution of their marriage. Elena's lawyer presented the evidence: the bank statements showing the use of joint funds for personal indulgences, the timeline of the affair, and even the ring purchase. Malik's side tried to downplay the severity, arguing that he had every intention to pay Elena back and that the affair was a personal matter, not a financial one. But the judge seemed unimpressed by Malik's arguments. At one point he asked, "Mr. Johnson, can you explain why you used your wife's money, which was earmarked for a legitimate business venture, to buy jewelry and fund a lavish lifestyle for yourself and Ms. Peterson?" Malik stammered, attempting to weave a story about art connections and promotion, but he fumbled. The facts were against him. After a succinct review, the judge granted Elena a favorable settlement that included reimbursement of the $15,000 plus additional damages, given Malik's deceptive conduct. Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her as the gavel hit. Malik cast her a resentful look, but she refused to meet his gaze. She had once stood beside him, imagining a future filled with mutual dreams. Now, that same man had forced her to stand across from him in court, severing the last ties of their marriage. When it was over, they stepped outside into the drizzly afternoon. Elena paused under the courthouse awning. She took a breath, blinking away tears. She had won a legal victory, but it felt bittersweet. No triumph could restore the years of love lost or the heartache endured. Malik approached, hands in his pockets. "Guess this is it," he said quietly. She mustered a neutral expression. "It is. I'll be in touch about returning any leftover belongings." He started to say something else, perhaps an apology or an attempt at reconciliation. But she turned and walked away, each step feeling lighter, as though she had shed a massive weight. The storm clouds overhead seemed to part slightly, letting in a sliver of pale sunlight. It wasn't a grand cinematic moment, but it felt symbolic. She was stepping toward her future, leaving the courtroom calm and her past behind. Once the legal proceedings concluded, Elena found herself with a semblance of financial restitution. The judge had ruled that Malik owed her the $15,000 plus additional damages for emotional distress. While it didn't erase the emotional toll, it gave her a fresh start. She debated how best to use the money. Initially, she thought of taking a well-deserved vacation to clear her head, perhaps a trip to Europe or an island retreat. But the idea felt hollow, more like an escape than a resolution. Then one day, as she was leaving her shift at the hospital, she saw a flyer pinned to the community board, "Women's Wellness Clinic, volunteers and funding needed." It caught her eye. The clinic was aimed at providing low-cost or free healthcare for women in marginalized communities, a cause close to Elena's heart. She attended an informational meeting, learning about their mission to provide not just medical services, but also counseling, vocational training, and childcare support. Elena felt her spirit resonate with the project. She saw herself in the faces of the women they aimed to help, people who wanted stability, health, and hope amid life's challenges. That night, she made the decision. She would donate a significant portion of the settlement to help open a wellness clinic for low-income women. She'd keep a bit for her personal savings, but the bulk would fuel a tangible, impactful cause. It was a better use of the money than some ill-fated gallery project or a revenge splurge. The decision filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. She reached out to the clinic's organizers, offering both her financial support and her skills as a nurse. They were thrilled, and within weeks, plans were underway to expand their services, hire more staff, and renovate a second-floor space for private consultations. The day she wrote the check and handed it over, a wave of gratitude swept through her. She imagined how many women might receive help, medical exams, therapy sessions, educational workshops, all because she had redirected her pain into something constructive. In a small ceremony, the clinic recognized her donation by naming a new counseling room after her. She blushed at the gesture but felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. This was the first time since the betrayal that she felt genuinely proud of how her life was moving forward. The money she once earmarked for Malik's dream was now lighting the path for countless women in need, and that felt infinitely more rewarding. In the weeks that followed, Elena found herself with more free time. She'd cut back on extra shifts at the hospital, longing to rediscover parts of herself she'd neglected. One day, while organizing some old storage boxes, she found a dusty set of acrylic paints and a few blank canvases. Memories flooded back. She used to paint in college, back when she first met Malik. She'd stopped soon after they got married, preferring to help him focus on his art, his dreams. Now, she felt a subtle thrill coursing through her as she spread out the supplies on her kitchen table. She stared at the blank canvas, unsure of where to begin. Her mind teemed with jumbled emotions: anger, sadness, relief, and newfound hope. She dipped the brush into a swirl of bright blues and greens, letting the colors flow without a plan. Each stroke felt like a release, transferring her tumult of feelings onto the canvas. She lost track of time, the hours melting away as she immersed herself in the creative process. By the time she stepped back, she was sweaty and her hands were stained with paint. The result was an abstract piece, a tapestry of vibrant streaks and splashes that captured the chaos and renewal she felt. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, an unfiltered reflection of her journey. She hung the finished painting on her living room wall, feeling a rush of pride every time she walked by it. It symbolized the start of something new. She was no longer just Malik's wife or the victim of a betrayal. She was Elena, an individual with her own talents, her own passions. On a whim, she shared a photo of the painting on social media with a simple caption: "Rediscovering Old Passions. #New Beginnings." The post received an outpouring of support from friends, family, and even strangers who found inspiration in her journey. Some asked if she planned to do more paintings, or if she'd consider selling them. She chuckled, not sure she was ready for that step yet. For now, painting was her therapy, a way to process her feelings and reclaim her identity. Over the next few weeks, she created several more pieces, each one telling a different part of her story. One featured dark, moody tones, symbolizing her heartbreak. Another burst with bright reds and oranges, capturing her fierce determination to move forward. Little by little, each canvas helped her heal. She was discovering that sometimes the best way to move on was to paint the pain in bold, vivid colors and transform it into art. Elena's story caught the attention of a local magazine after word spread about her generous donation to the women's clinic. A journalist reached out, expressing interest in featuring her. At first, Elena hesitated. She'd never seen herself as the public face of anything. But after some thought, she realized it could be a powerful way to highlight the clinic's mission and potentially inspire others who'd gone through betrayal or heartbreak. She agreed to an interview, which took place in the modest lounge area of the newly expanded clinic. The journalist, a woman named Jada, arrived with a notepad and a warm smile. Elena expected questions purely about the clinic, but the interview quickly became personal. Jada asked about Elena's motivations, her background, and eventually, the ordeal with Malik. Elena, remembering her vow to let the truth speak for itself, explained how she redirected the money once intended for her husband's gallery. She avoided lurid details about the affair, focusing instead on the transformation she underwent. Some people might say you turned heartbreak into hope, Jada remarked, scribbling notes. What's the biggest lesson you've learned from all this? Elena paused, reflecting. That healing doesn't come from revenge. It comes from rebuilding your life, your passions, and your sense of purpose. And sometimes, that rebuilding can help others along the way. A few weeks later, the article appeared in the local magazine under the headline, Resilience in Action, How One Woman's Heartbreak Sparked a Community Revival. It featured photos of Elena at the clinic, standing next to the counseling room named after her, and a few candid shots of her painting at home. The response was overwhelming. Neighbors, co-workers, and even acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years reached out with messages of support. Her social media lit up with encouraging comments and questions about how to volunteer or donate to the clinic. She was moved by the outpouring, realizing that by sharing her story, she'd inadvertently inspired people. In the midst of all this positive buzz, Elena found a sense of closure. She no longer worried about Malik's next move or Tessa's online presence. She had become her own story, one of heartbreak, transformation, and empowerment. And while the path had been brutal, she finally felt like she was standing on solid ground, forging ahead with her head held high. A year had passed since the betrayal that nearly broke her. Elena walked along a street in the Arts District, the very place she once scouted with Malik in dreams of opening a gallery. The neighborhood bustled with activity, colorful murals, quaint coffee shops, and art studios welcoming curious passers-by. She paused in front of a storefront with large windows. This was the space she once envisioned securing for Malik, the place her $15,000 was supposed to help lease. The sign on the door read, "For lease." Though her mind briefly flashed to the life she'd once hoped to build, she felt no bitterness. Instead, she smiled, imagining the possibilities. Just then, she felt a reassuring weight in her purse, the settlement money she had left for herself, combined with some extra savings. She'd already invested a chunk in the women's clinic, and that had brought her immeasurable joy. But she still had a cushion, enough to perhaps start something new. On a whim, she called the number listed on the sign. Within minutes, a realtor showed up, eager to show her the interior. Elena stepped into the empty space, her footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floor. It was a blank canvas, the same way she'd once seen Malik's dream. Only now, she realized it could be her own canvas, an opportunity to merge her renewed love for painting with a desire to serve the community. As she surveyed the high ceilings and sunlight streaming through the windows, an idea formed in her mind, a creative wellness studio. Part art gallery, part community workshop, part reflection space. She pictured an area for painting classes, another for meditation sessions, and maybe a small corner to sell local artists' work, donating a percentage to the clinic. It felt like a fitting extension of her journey, combining art, healing, and community service. By the time she finished the tour, her heart thumped with excitement. She told the realtor she'd think about it, but deep down, she sensed she was already sold. This wasn't about competing with Malik's dream, it was about carving out her own. She stepped back onto the bustling sidewalk, a sense of peace enveloping her. She no longer felt the ache of betrayal gnawing at her. Instead, she felt a quiet confidence, the knowledge that she'd survived the worst and emerged with her spirit intact. Slipping her hands into her pockets, she remembered the check she had once given Malik, how it had symbolized hope for the future. Now, she carried that same hope inside her, multiplied by the lessons she had learned. This time, the dream was hers, and she wouldn't let anyone else define it or take it away. Exactly 1 year later, Elena found herself in a small, cozy corner of what was now her wellness studio and community art space. The past months had been a whirlwind, finalizing the lease, renovating the storefront, and hosting soft-open workshops. The place thrived on collaborative energy. Local artists taught painting classes, mental health counselors offered group sessions, and Elena herself contributed as both nurse and artist, bridging the gap between physical and mental well-being. She stood near a mural she'd painted herself, a vibrant depiction of rising phoenixes intertwined with blooming flowers, symbols of rebirth and growth. The studio buzzed with life, a group of women practicing yoga in one corner, a table of kids learning watercolor techniques in another. Warm lights and potted plants gave the space a welcoming aura. Elena exhaled, recalling how different her life had been a year ago. On this day last year, she discovered the man she loved celebrating with another woman, the check she'd saved for his dream wasted on betrayal. Now, she was celebrating a different kind of anniversary, her independence and resilience. Her phone buzzed with a reminder, anniversary, 1 year. She chuckled at her calendar's blunt notification. She had forgotten to remove the date. But instead of sadness or anger, she felt only a sense of accomplishment. She'd transformed the darkest chapter of her life into a beacon of hope for herself and others. Carmen, her best friend, walked in carrying a small cake with a single candle on top. "I figured we should commemorate the day," she said, grinning from ear to ear. Elena laughed. "Seriously? Why not?" Carmen replied, placing the cake on a nearby table. "Let's light this candle and make a wish. Consider it a toast to your freedom, and to the future." Elena closed her eyes, thinking about the wish she'd make. She didn't need revenge or an apology. She had rebuilt her life, piece by piece. Her mind flashed to the women's clinic, thriving with new resources, and her busy art studio brimming with creativity. She felt a wave of gratitude for the people who had supported her, for the heartbreak that forced her to rediscover her strength, and for the opportunity to create something meaningful out of pain. She opened her eyes, blew out the candle, and smiled. "To the real anniversary," she said softly, voice tinged with pride. Carmen clapped, and the echo mingled with the soft hum of conversations and laughter filling the studio. It was a day worth celebrating, not the end of a marriage, but the beginning of a life she had claimed for herself. Free from lies, free from betrayal, and filled with a hard-earned sense of peace and purpose. I'm glad you made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please go ahead and generously hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating tales like this. We'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you learned from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.